Blog Talk Radio.
When you're born in this world, you're given a ticket to the freak show.
It's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
And when you're born in America, you're given a front row seat.
So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents.
Forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't.
There is no America. There is no democracy.
You have no choice. You have owners. They own you.
There is only IBM and ITT and AT&T and DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and Exxon. Those are the nations of the world today.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
Do you know how naive you sound?
Why?
Senators and presidents don't have men killed.
Oh. Who's being naive, Kay?
They got you by the balls.
Oh, yeah. Well, all right. Hello, and welcome to the front row at the Freak Show. It is so nice when shit just works, ain't it? Hey, I am your host, Crafty, coming to you live, as always, from deep in the heart of FEMA Region 1. No bullshit there either. Southern New Hampshire is pretty much dead balls on in the middle of this thing. Hey, I do have an extra spring in my step tonight. You might even notice it in my voice, I'm not sure. But no, I'm sorry. Sorry to report, I didn't get laid or anything this weekend. But the spring is from spring, right? Yeah. Yes, and gosh darn, Dee, the equinox hath arrived. And sooner it could not come. After this winter, I, for one, was doing some good old dance ritual shit all weekend. Seriously, I sacrificed a goat.
Did you just cut out there? Oh, yeah. Sounds like our host cut out. Well, you all know me. I'm the Adamizer, co-hosting as always. And I'm sure our buddy Crafty will be back in just a minute. And, yeah, let's see. What am I going to do to fill this time this week? Looks like this is becoming a regular thing. Okay, I'll sing for y'all. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, our topic tonight, we're picking up round 2 on economics, both big and small, talking about where we'd like to see the world in economics and where the problems are today. As you know, my biggest problem just about in the world is this whole competitive economic system that we like to call capitalism. I'm not a fan, sorry. For those of you who've drinking the Kool-Aid and do believe that nothing more American or Christian or whatever else you want to call it than capitalism, I think you need to do your homework. Most of the folks listening to this show know that we've been lied to about just about everything from Jesus to America to you name it, you know. So for you to think that you're not being lied to about capitalism seems a little absurd. I sincerely recommend that you look into it and you understand what the real faults are. Yes, it may be a step up from feudalism or slavery, but not a very big step. Most of us are still slaving away from 9 to 5, and if we're lucky, from 9 to 5. A lot of people nowadays either are working 9 till midnight or they're out there looking for a job and can't get one since, of course, despite what they're telling you in the news, real unemployment is up at about 1 in 4 people these days. And even then, a lot of them, do we got our host?
Yeah, I'm here, man. When did I go out? When did I go out?
I was gonna let you know, but I just kind of had to pick up the ball and run with it a little here, so I hadn't gotten a chance to type. But welcome back.
When exactly did I go out?
You've been out about 2 minutes. You were in for a little while, and you were doing good, and then just out of the blue, I think you said something about a goat or whatever, and boom, dropped out.
It's always the goats that get you.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure
man,
our lovely powers that be cutting you off out there somewhere. Or it's just that capitalism makes shitty products and your microphone is crap.
The microphone is great, man. I tell you, been recording stuff, and last week it worked right after the show, of course. I don't know. Well, we'll talk about the technical bullshit later, but
coming through loud and clear.
Anyway, well, I'm glad you picked up the stick, and I didn't have to call in. It was able to remedy itself here, so I am at least. I see your final little thing to me was the mic sounds good too. So
yeah, I know. Right after I typed that's when you dropped out. I'm like, oh, okay.
Irony.
I think I jinxed you.
Irony at work. So anyway, I just to recap, I think what I was going on with was, obviously was about to introduce you, but just as always, Front Row at the Freak Show brought to you by no one, but it is brought to you with a lot of blood, sweat, tears, and of course a whole lot of love. And after I got that bullshit out of the way, it was just time to bring you on. So where did you start going with this, Adamizer?
Oh, I was just talking a little bit about what our topic's going to be tonight and reminding folks how much I'm not really a fan of capitalism or competitive economics, and how I was going to be expanding upon that again tonight. And, call me a communist, that's fine. I don't, being one of the few Americans that knows what that word means, I don't really mind. It has nothing to do with Soviets, has nothing to do with dictatorships or any of that crap. It's simply an end to private property, to classism, and the means by which our elitist, rich douchebags basically keep us enslaved and chained to our desks all day. So bring it on.
Excellent. And I'm very excited actually to get deeper in to the topic. A little bit more than we were actually able to cover last week, and very interested to hear your, finally get to your communism slant. I, on the other hand, am all jacked up, and in preparation for the show, I spent a lot of time reading and going back over a lot of the Zeitgeist movement material, and not so much. We'll get to it obviously, but more just the intricacies of the broken system we're in, more than necessarily their plans, their ultimate plan, right?
Now let me jump in and ask you this, if I may. Do you realize that the resource-based economy promoted by the Zeitgeist movement is essentially a not-too-cloaked rebranding of communism? That, in fact, if you listen to many of the interviews with Peter Joseph, he doesn't deny being a communist. That's exactly what he's talking about when he talks about a resource-based economy. You can't have that as anything but
denies being a communist wholeheartedly.
That's not the impression. I mean, I realize that he likes to shake off the label, but at the same time, if you watch that interview with Molyneux and everything else, he doesn't exactly come out defensive when he's when people start calling it communism. I think he's well aware, and if he's not aware that that's what it is, that's fine. But that is what it is, man. That's what we're talking about. That's what a resource-based economy essentially is.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's why I'm going to be excited to hear you break it down and define it, right? So, and as to fill the freaks in out there, again, I just as probably Joseph is aware, I think labeling it as such, the power of words, man, right? So even if it is closely resembling the true, traditional, original theory of communism, to label it such would only be doing it harm at this point, right?
Well,
and would only steer it off the tracks and get people to stop listening immediately.
Go
ahead. Well, I was just going to finish by saying I think a lot of his research and a lot of his a lot about the resource-based economy comes from and stems from all the ideology being kind of outdated. Whether it's capitalism, communism, fascism, they were all essentially started, founded, and adhered to, or one way or the other, at a time that was much different than the world we live in today, right? When scarcity was actually a problem. Come on!
You're going to tell me that scarcity isn't a problem today? The only reason it's not a problem is that capitalism depends on scarcity. Without scarcity, supply and demand doesn't work. It needs scarcity. Scarcity is a thing, man. Look around.
Right,
We're not
what
out of it at home here.
What he is saying is it doesn't need to be scarce, right?
Yes.
If that's what he's saying, we can produce enough food to feed the world 2 times over, 3 times over. We can produce enough energy.
The thing that's keeping us from doing that is capitalism. I mean, and I understand that if you watch the movies, they do go in and they try and say capitalism and communism are both outdated, et cetera, et cetera. But it really is if you understand. And again, hopefully we'll have time to really delve into this today. But if you understand the basics of what communism means, that's exactly what they're describing. I mean, at the end of the day, they're talking about a system where you don't have people hoarding all of the wealth of the world while other people are starving to death. That's communism, man. That's what we're talking about. That's the whole idea. That you don't have super rich elites that have all of the resources while other people have no resources and are starving to death. It's the same basic principle. It's a rebranding. And let me just say, you talk about the idea of using, and you and I talked offline about the idea of using a different word, and a lot of people have gone for that. A lot of people have, simply rebranded communism as resource-based economy or the sharing economy or something like that. I can't do it, man. I can't do it because it's dishonest, and because a lot of people, a lot of very good people, especially early on, died for that word. I'm not about to step out of reality and bend the true vocabulary and bend the real definition of words just because the average American thinks that communism has something to do with Soviets or dictatorship or.
Let's see where this goes, Adamizer, because again, by taking some elements of communism and carrying them all the way through to an actual legitimate, planned out, organized, what they're calling resource-based economy, is a giant leap, right? And so when communism was started, did they have the vision of, say, food towers that again can produce, one tower can produce, can feed LA in the same square footage that any one of their high-rise buildings is taking up right now.
No. I mean, of course, they didn't have the technology for that sort of thing at the time. They hadn't studied the points of how to really economically produce and manage the resources. But the concept, again, the concept boils down to equal opportunity and equal resource, not necessarily equal resources, but a reasonable distribution of resources so that you don't have this thing that we have now where a fraction of 1% of the society has as much wealth as 50% of the society. That's insanity, and that's what we need to get away from.
I'm going to put you right onto that word right now. And what do you mean by reasonable? And who decides what's reasonable? So when you really walk through the entire resource-based economy plan, I mean, it's as he puts it, no one and everyone making the decisions, right? It's not people that are democratic or in a democracy. It's ideas, right? So So again, I think there is a legitimate claim that he can, hey, look, one of his things that he's kind of always said, and this is true. I mean, there's basically no new ideas out there, right? Everything comes from what has been learned over the last thousands of years, right? So there's ultimately no new ideas. It's not like me or him are claiming this is a brand new philosophy. And I think to get caught up on in arguing that fact is detrimental to both of our causes, right?
Well, I think you're right in the sense that, again, the resource-based economy or communism, whatever you want to call it, was practiced for tens of thousands of years by the Native Americans, just as one example. So you're absolutely right that it's not a new idea. What we need to do is focus on examining the ideas of the past, examining the ideas to date, and sorting the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, and realizing what does work and what doesn't, and stop kidding ourselves into thinking that, again, capitalism is wonderful just because that's what we're told to believe. If we're told, we're told to believe America is wonderful, we're told to believe Christianity is wonderful, we know these things aren't true. And if we take a good long look at capitalism, then we're going to understand very quickly that it's a scam. It's nothing but an exploitative system designed to keep a very small majority in complete power over the masses. That's all it does. So, again, we'll take a look at that longer, as we come to haranguing around later on. But in the meantime, I think we just need to realize that the resource-based economy itself is nothing new. And, again, people were making that work for tens of thousands of years right here in America before white people ever showed up. That's what it was.
Yep, and on 80, 90, maybe even 100% of those last minute two you just said, I wholeheartedly agree. But let's keep that for a few minutes down the road here in the front row, okay?
Sounds good to me.
I'm jacked up, Adamizer, and I can tell you are too, and I love it. It's fantastic. Let's bring it on. I'm licking my chops for the show tonight, and I did want to. I'm going to spring this on you, and I'm wondering if I can ask you a favor. If you could type this into the chat room for me, but I actually tweeted it out. Didn't get much of a response on a tweet. Maybe I did it a little too late, but I wanted to start a new feature on the front row, and that's the front row at the Freak Show live chat question of the night. And tonight, for you freaks hanging out in the chat room, and I can see, let's see, I wish I was data. I was hanging out in the
that's Jimmy.
In the
that's
chat
Jimmy
room.
From last week. Remember Jimmy?
I do.
Pretty
yes,
sure
that's right. He said he
it's one of our
yeah.
callers from last week. I bumped into him on Twitter.
Yes. Okay. So anyway, the front row at the Freak Show live chat question of the night, and again, if you could do me the favor, I got everything else open over here. I thought maybe the chat room having it up in the main studio was what was causing the mic to crash. So I opened it up in a new window, but then it's not right in front of me. So anyway, how long, freaks, do you think
I'm sorry.
have...
Sorry to interrupt. It was Brian, not Jimmy. I knew I was 50-50 on that. I'm sorry. It's Brian.
Brian, right. Yes, okay, Brian. And good to have him aboard, and I'm sure we'll have our other regular freaks coming in and checking in pretty soon. But at least for Brian right now, how long do you think we have until the proverbial shit hits the fan? That's basically the front row at the Freak Show live chat question of the night. Little longer explanation, basically how long until an event, at least on the scale of the 07-08 meltdown happens. And of course, you're free to answer that it won't, right? Or at least not in the foreseeable future. Maybe anything over 50 years. But just again, I'm not talking recession or depression here. I'm talking virtually overnight meltdown. Are we in store for another one? And if so, when? So let's see your answers in the live chat. I'll try to throw that out a couple of times. Adamizer, hopefully we'll get that typed in. And so before we move to the next segment, let's just take a quick break. And we'll come back right around after this. Or this. What up, freaks? Hey, you're listening to Front Row at the Freak Show. Check us out at frontrowatthefreakshow.com, at Adamizer1, at The Freak Show, and, of course, Front Row at the Freak Show on YouTube and Facebook. Peace!
At the foothills of forever I trip, fall into frustration again.
All right, and we're back at the Front Row at the Freak Show. And I guess before we officially get into the scuttlebutt, Adamizer, as we were going over a little bit, getting ready for the show, I had mentioned that I wanted to spend a little bit of time actually addressing Jimmy from the 781 and his question about hope, right, from last week.
Yep.
And so, is there any hope? Is it all hopeless? Is total or close to total collapse inevitable? And obviously, if that's the case, and the next question invariably is when, which is kind of why I picked the Front Row at the Freak Show live chat question for the night. But, it's actually really a question that I ask myself all the time and almost constantly, right? Constantly analyzing, surveying, and pondering on some level. But I think we have to, for the sake of Jimmy and the 781, and I hope he's listening, and maybe even he'll call us in, and he can better kind of define his question. But I think we have to start with defining hope, because what does he mean by it? Is he hopeful that we'll be able to continue living exactly or close to how we are now, or of course maybe even improving on that lifestyle and everyday choices that we now have? Or is it more hopeful that mankind itself will continue to exist and that we don't somehow blow ourselves up and see our species, the human species, go the way of the dodo bird? But more than that, I wanted to offer Jimmy from the 781 and all the freaks out there something better than hope. Because ultimately, at least as how I define it, hope is very passive by nature, right? I mean, we hope for a new bike on our birthday as kids. We hope our team wins the game, or we hope the surgery goes okay for a loved one, right? I don't think this is about hope. It's about belief and believing. To use the team in a game example, do you ever hear like a professional athlete, not just kids playing town or school sports, but an actual pro athlete say before a big game, "Gee, I hope we win"? Sure, maybe those words have been uttered before, but you don't. Or what do you hear? You hear, "Hey, I believe if we play our game, try not to do too much, insert a couple of cliches, then I believe we can win," right? You don't hear a coach or a GM say, "Well, we're just hoping that Jorge Nussbaum falls to us in the draft so we can pick him and we should be good next year." Or with a surgery, you don't hear doctors saying, "Hey, I just hope we don't make a mistake in there." Or, "Man, I hope we don't find this when we open them up." Point being, the word hope and the use of it, let alone the act of engaging in it, is again a passive thing. And also, to repeat, it's about belief and believing. And I believe we as humans have enough understanding of science and the sciences, the intellect, the technology, and, very important here, the self-serving interests of survival, not just us as individuals, but for our entire family, and you can extend that out as far as you'd like with friends and everything else. But, and I don't want to dwell or linger on that thought, but just to clarify and explain it, that thing inside all of us that brings us to the conclusion that, say, murder or violence is wrong, not because of any invisible man in the sky, but because it's only going to help us actually live longer, or our loved ones live longer, by not being a victim of such an act. So, Anyway, and Adamizer, please feel free to interject anytime. You know, I kind of told you I had a couple minutes of ranting that I could do here, but and I'll just keep going unless you have anything to interject.
Keep on going, man. You're doing good.
All right. So, anyway, as I've already mentioned the show, I got ready this week by going back over a lot of the Zeitgeist movement stuff. And what I actually ended up rewatching was not any of the films of the trilogy, but Peter Joseph's Culture in Decline series that he put out in 2012. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I remember that one.
Okay. Well, we'll probably talk more about it when we actually get to the economy stuff. But it's it's a 6-part series, all about a half an hour long, each one with a different kind of main focus.
Yeah.
And in number 6, Joseph pretends that he has this time machine, right? And he asks us to imagine that right now we have 2 paths lying ahead of us.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll take the time machine down each path. First, of course, he goes down the path that where we don't really change any of the current trends, ideology, thinking, or actions. And the time machine brings him down the road 100 years, and as you might suspect, the picture is not a pretty one. America is ultimately toppled, both externally and internally, and it's pretty much a bleak and barren scene with the only thing that is in abundance being scarcity, poverty, crime, etc.
Well, now, the America being toppled thing, how's that a bad thing? Come on, let's end it. Let's move on. Let's get to the next, whatever it's going to be.
So the other path, as you can imagine, is one where there was a mass enlightenment at some point, where the people took back control mostly over themselves, but by doing so ushered in a truly new Renaissance period where things like scarcity, poverty, and crime were not totally eliminated, but a mere fraction of what they are today. You know, not a utopia, mind you, simply a world where science, logic, intellectual thought, and respect for all life and the planet we inhabit were the dominating forces. You know, and I actually thought of it a lot like the quote that you threw out either last week or 2 weeks ago. You know, fairly popular one, the Indian proverb saying whatever about the 2 wolves, right, inside of us.
Yeah,
and the one that we feed is the one
that's actually gotten very popular. I saw it, a TV show referenced that the other day.
Nice. So I see it a lot like that. You know, the one we feed is the one that survives. So I believe that world can exist, all right, as opposed to do I hope we make it there. And that's really ultimately all I was trying to get at, because I just want to that word hope. I was like, you know, I think we hope for stuff and then sit back and see if it happens, right? Yep. Whereas if we believe in something, we tend to attack it and plan for it and go for it.
Right. Well, you know, and I absolutely agree with you. I think that there's no question. I mean, really, I see 2 roads myself, and I see, you know, one road is that we pull our head out of our ass and we, you know, stop competing over scraps and fighting amongst each other while the rich are screwing us in the ass, and, you know, start to give a shit about our environment and the toxic chemicals that we're feeding to our kids and everything else. You know, that's the utopian world, if you want to call it that. The other path, as I see it, is simple self-destruction. We kill ourselves off as a species. I mean, you're only going to end one way or the other. You know, if we keep going down this path, you know, it's a bump on the road to talk about, well, America's fallen and, you know, there's crime and there's scarcity everywhere and everything else. That's just a bump on the road to our own extinction. And, you know, those are the two options that we have. We're either going to kill ourselves off and, you know, and keep going down the road we've been going, which is this lovely capitalist road that ends with one fat white guy sitting on a pile of bodies wishing somebody would make him a sandwich. And, you know, or the other road, which is, you know, we pull our heads out of our asses and we fix all this shit. And I do absolutely believe that, you know, that we will go down the right road eventually. It's just a question of what's going to have to happen before that takes place. Because, we both talked about it last week. If 9/11 didn't wake people up, then, it's really going to take a full collapse of the system and people being on their own finally to realize that there's a better way to move forward.
Yeah. No, I can agree. And you know what, Adamizer, I'm very glad that you actually mentioned 9/11 there. And not that I'm going to go on a 9/11 rant, but or anything. But oh, I could, believe me. There'll be a day for that. No, but it's funny because in the same call when we're talking about hope and everything, right, and what we were talking about a little bit off air, getting ready for the show, are we just going to sit here and, bitch about the way things are or talk about solutions or what have you, right? I kind of all rolled into the same question from Jimmy in the 781, but I think as it pertains to the front row at the Freak Show, well, let me give an example. I believe you said you were familiar with the work of James Corbett, right? Corbett Report.
Yes, very lightly, but I am familiar, yes.
Yeah, okay. So, CorbettReport.com, and it's one of my, I don't know if to say favorites, but I like James. I like the way he goes about his business, and when you go to his site, everything is linked and sourced to the nth degree. Very user friendly. He does a lot of open source research. And whatever. But an 9/11 anniversary or two ago, maybe even 3, he put out a short little podcast, and it was basically 9/11 naming names. I forget the name of it offhand, but the point of his whole podcast was it was time for the 9/11 movement to grow up. Right? Stop arguing about nanothermite and planes and no planes and what hit what and this and that, and to start actually naming names, right? And breaking down the true conspiracy that happened on that day, okay? And I completely agree, right? I completely agree with him. And I want him to go do that. But meanwhile, my point is that we still haven't reached critical mass yet in the number of people that think anything is, not according to the official narrative, right? So until we get to that critical mass, naming names and calling out, Marsh McLennan or Richard Armitage or L. Paul Bremer, it's still falling on too many deaf ears, right? So, point is, yes, James, please go forward, go on with the research, name names. I will be back here, right, trying to get more people onto the whole something's fucked up here.
Well,
so
now let me jump in for a minute.
I'm bringing that to the whole. What's that?
I said if I can jump in for a minute here. So is he saying that there's too much infighting amongst folks that are in the know about 9/11 with regards to details like nanothermite or what plane hit where? That there's a lot of infighting? Because I really haven't seen that at all. I feel like everybody who's kind of figured this out is much more, doing what we're doing with trying to wake people up about it than worrying about, some little detail here or there. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe maybe I'm just running with a different crowd. I don't know.
No. It wasn't an infighting type of a situation. He's just like, it's time to put like that evidence that everything has been done, right, to ad nauseum, right? So we don't need any new documentaries on, what went down that day or this. Let's move on to the next phase in getting these criminals in the spotlight. So not so much. I mean, obviously, that there are some, you do have some wild, you have, I forget her name now offhand, but the lady, who absolutely no planes were involved. That theory comes along, and some super weapon from the sky zapped down the buildings. You have a few.
Yeah. I've seen the fringe folks and whatnot, but you know what? I honestly don't know if I care about the names. I mean, I could give a shit about pointing fingers and figuring out, which specific individuals were involved with this. I'm much more interested in the fact that it was done. I'm much more interested in the fact that it was pulled off essentially under the noses of the masses who still believe that it was some Arab in a cave who pulled this shit off. I'm much more concerned with the public consciousness and the idea that, Americans and people across the world in a lot of places are so brain-whipped that this official story just passes muster, given all of the facts that are out there for anybody that wants to look at it. I mean, yes, do I want to see the people responsible punished? Certainly, but to me that's such a secondary concern to dealing with the fact that everybody just let it happen and went on with the official story like it was nothing. That, to me, is the much bigger issue here.
No, I agree to an extent, and I don't think he, and hopefully I didn't suggest that it was about, punishing or trying to jail, right? It was more getting to the official kind of like why it, when you're trying to talk to people about the bullshit story and well, why would they do something like that? And then you kind of start getting into, the rampant insider trading of Marsh McLennan and the roles and the interconnection of the CIA to Wall Street, which, in fact, is actually the bigger story than 9/11, right? I mean, 9/11 was kind of a symptom almost of that relationship of the intelligence agencies and the big banks and Wall Street. That's where the rubber meets the road right there, Adamizer. Okay?
Oh, I agree with you.
I think that's more what he was trying to say, right? And then, obviously, he does go on, and it's like, well, look at L. Paul Bremer. Look at Marsh McLennan. Look at Richard Armitage. All these guys who crisscross it back and forth from the World Trade Tower specifically to the intelligence agencies, then were elected to high officials over in Iraq, and where more billions went missing. So, hey, what do you know? We did get on a 9/11 rant. But anyway, and let me try to pull it all back here, because that's ultimately what I was getting at, was that, trying to, come out here, episode 5, redefine Front Row at the Freak Show, not redefine or define it, right, is that, and again, as it relates to the question from last week and all that, look, if there's still people that don't know that the Federal Reserve is a private institution, right, how are we ever going to get them on this, to talk about these, scarcity issues or all these other issues, right? If we can't even get them into that fact. So,
yeah. And you're absolutely right. I think, just to put my final 2 cents in on it, is that, you talked about the relationships between CIA, Wall Street, and others. And the reality is we have to accept that there really is this axis going on behind the scenes with the sole goal of keeping the mass of people subservient to the minority. It's the you think we live in a democratic country, you're crazy. This is the opposite of a democracy. When you've got Wall Street and the CIA and the 1% all being in bed together just to keep you at your desk working and thankful that you live in a, quote, free country, which is a fucking joke. It's absolutely nothing but covert slavery. That's what we have going on today, and that's what we need to stop. That's what we really need to realize. If they can, they're controlling us not through chains anymore, but by controlling our minds through false stories about 9/11, by pulling off 9/11, by completely infiltrating the news media and telling people that this is anything but entertainment that you're seeing at 6 o'clock on Channel 5, 9, and 7. This is fucking crazy, man. We need to wake the hell up, and we need to stop letting them turn our minds into mush and turn us into sheep.
I would only argue that it's covert slavery and
self-slavery. You're right.
It is right out in the open. All right, hey Adamizer, let's take a quick 30-second break and come on back with Scuttlebutt. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Conspiracy, maybe. Screwed, definitely. Hey, you're listening to The Front Row at the Freak Show on blogtalkradio.com. For all things Freak Show, please visit us at frontrowatthefreakshow.com. Find us on Twitter at Adamizer1 and at The Freak Show. And, of course, Front Row at the Freak Show on YouTube and Facebook. All right, you freaks be good now, you hear?
At the foothills of forever I trip, fall into frustration again.
All right, and we're back, and let's give that number out finally. If you want to call in, please do 646-668-8756. Give us a call here at the Front Row. Let us know what you are thinking about the economy or hope or lack thereof, or 9/11 if you wish. Chime in on anything that you'd like. The number again is 646-668-8756. And we shall move it on to the Front Row Scuttlebutt. Adamizer? Why don't you take it away, my friend?
Let's try to do this back and forth thing. I really think it might be good to get a rhythm going. Let's just remember, though, that we have to make sure we signal to the other person somehow that we have completed and it's time for them to do their story. Because, we got that slight tech issue with the delays. Anyway, not that I like to bring that stuff up on air, but we all have tech issues. It happens. So
absolutely.
Let's see. I think I keep going first. You want to take the first one?
Sure thing.
All right.
I will lead us right off. You got it. All right. So let's see. Okay. My first story. Actually, it's funny because we were both talking about late-breaking news that came in. But you know what? I'm gonna stick with. I think at least for now, I'm gonna stick with what we got. And the first story that I have is coming to you from rawstory.com. The counted inside search for the real number of police killings in the United States. And it's a good piece on the farce that is accountability from anyone that is in a position of authority in this country. And here's a quote from someone. I'll just read the quote. The reality is that there is not a good national data or even a regional, state, or local data on officer-involved shootings, said Lori Robinson, a professor of criminology at George Mason University and co-chair of our president's task force on community policing. And it's really something, isn't it? The government tracks and records all of your phone calls, emails, texts, and of course, if you ever get the IRS crosshairs pointed on you, they do their best Mr. T impersonation and pity the fool who doesn't have a receipt for every last square of toilet paper he or she used for the last 7 years, but keeping track every time an officer of the law kills a civilian or simply pops a cap in their ass? Whatever. Adamizer, you're up.
All right. Well, you know what? Since you're going to lead off with that, I think I'll rearrange my order a little bit and hit off on another cop-related story, cop-killing-related story. This one comes to us from it's a site called AATTP.org. I believe that's something Americans Against the Tea Party. You can imagine I'm not a fan of Tea Party politics. But they're actually reporting on a New York Post story where the New York Post has allegedly uncovered James O'Keefe, a well-known activist, conservative activist, hatching a plot to, at least allegedly hatching a plot, to bait protesters into killing cops. And the headline here is New York Post uncovers James O'Keefe plot to bait protesters into killing cops. Now, you and I discussed this one a little bit beforehand, and you seemed a little skeptical. And I'm the first to say, hey, by all means, anybody out there should be double-checking their stories, seeing if there's something to it. Any story that I may bring up, that anybody may bring up, don't just accept it as fact. However, I got to say that, when it comes to the New York Post, it's not like they have a huge reputation for running unconfirmed stories. Now, they certainly are, somewhat agenda-based in a lot of ways, and they're not big fans in a lot of ways of conservative stuff, which is interesting because, more and more media is going over to the conservative side. But according to this article, there's a man who has come forward with evidence to the effect that he was instructed by O'Keefe. He worked for O'Keefe, and he was instructed by O'Keefe to go to protest meetings for these, these various protests going on across the country that you all know about, with Black Lives Matter, et cetera, against the police killings of unarmed black people or unarmed people in general. And he was told to go there and basically incite them with specific lines to say, to try to incite people into killing cops. And I got to say, I don't have a hard time believing that, given everything I've seen coming out of Conservatopia lately. All of the anti-protest stuff, and it's funny because when they throw a protest for whatever it is they're interested in, whether it's no more taxes and no more no rules at all on guns or whatever else. They're the first ones to say, oh, this is freedom, this is exercising our rights. But the moment that, black people come out and start protesting, they're called everything from hooligans to instigators to the N-word quite often if you hang out on Twitter. And there's this real battle going on out there. It does not surprise me in the slightest, given everything I've seen with regards to the dishonesty of conservatives and the recklessness when it comes to lives. I mean, you saw the letter that they sent to Iran recently. They don't give a shit about human lives. They don't give a shit about the cops that might actually be killed here. All they want to do is make the other side look bad. And I think that's exactly what this is. I have a tendency to believe it. I'm going to wait for the evidence to come in, but absolutely I don't put this past a conservative, not in this day and age.
I don't put it past conservatives, as you put it, or I don't put it past anyone really, but except for the man in question, right? Just following his work the last couple of years, listening to him in interviews, and hey, that doesn't mean that he's not putting on a facade and a front and all this other stuff. But I also, with a lot of the projects he's done and some of the videos he's done, he's pissed off a lot of people. And so I also don't put it past, with everything we know about COINTELPRO and all that. I'm going to be like you. I'm going to wait for the evidence to kind of come out on this. I will follow the story pretty closely, and I guess leave it at that. But
let me just add this piece to it, man. Not every conservative is lying. Some of them actually drank the Kool-Aid. They believe every word that they're saying. But the smart ones, okay, the ones that you say the kind of things that you just said about, where you're impressed with some of his work and whatnot, those are the ones that usually are putting up a facade and pulling a whole bunch of crazy shit behind the scenes that you're never going to know about unless it gets leaked to the Post like this did. So, like I say, we'll wait for the evidence to come in. But if I had to put a wager on it, I would say that this one may end up in the true column.
You know what? And just to expand on this a little bit, because I think it's important. I was saying to someone just the other day, and this is a perfect example, right? One of the biggest problems we face today, right, with the information boom and communication boom, having any idea of who the fuck to trust, right? Like, I mean, when you learn the level of deception and to use the word again, COINTELPRO and it's maddening. Really trying to get, like, how are we now? Obviously, the O'Keefe camp will come out and deny this, right? And then, so it's a tremendous example of that, right? Just that it is so hard to disseminate the information that we're getting in terms of, what the fuck the truth is, right?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, and again, it could easily be coming from anything. But you know what? I just feel like if somebody was going to set up a conservative, and that they would have picked a bigger target. I mean, this man does not have the audience of a Hannity or a Rush or whatever else. And so it just seems like a real low-level target if this is a setup. So I don't know. Like I say, wait till the evidence comes in to pass judgment.
Absolutely. And I see we do have a caller on the board. I would like to just get through another story or two here on Scuttlebutt. So if 805, if you don't mind holding on just a minute or two, we will get to you right after that. But speaking of which, my next story actually comes from abcnews.com, and it is the community reels siblings who perish in a deadly house fire. And I thought this was interesting, especially with what we've been talking about the last couple of weeks. Obviously, hey, it's awful anytime death is concerned, and I truly feel for the loved ones of the 7 basically kids, I think, not they were, I think, older kids, but kids none the same, that were killed in this New York blaze. But again, on the heels of our religion talk the last couple of weeks, I just couldn't help but highlight the supposed reason for the fire being that it was a hot plate being used, and it was left on because they were Jews observing the Sabbath, which I guess traditionally prohibits the use of fire on the Sabbath, and I guess that means ovens, but hot plates are okay. I don't claim to understand it. But of course, in their dutiful blind devotion to God, and God's apparent complete lack of appreciation by not saving even one of them. Of course, if one had survived, it would be, oh, well, thank God for sparing this life. And the beat just goes on. Adamizer, back to you.
All righty. My next story, speaking of conservatives, comes to us out of Texas. You can find it on npr.org. And the headline is a Confederate flag license plate free speech? This is kind of an interesting one. Apparently there's a group out there called the Sons of Confederate Veterans, okay? The SCV. And now Texas is one of these states where they'll let you get specialty plates for an extra fee, and people can basically submit their ideas for that, and it goes to the state for approval and whatnot. And in this case, they want to put on one, and it's got this square Confederate flag on it, and around the Confederate flag, it has their little logo, says Sons of Confederate Veterans, 1896, whatever else. Now, that's the main gist of the story, but, I can't believe that here, I can believe it out of Texas, I guess, but, here we are, it's 2015, and to be trying to do something, why not just try to put a burning cross on there? You can make it light up and everything, that'd be kind of nice. And to all of those out there and who have this illusion that the Civil War was not about slavery, and I've heard this many times, it wasn't about slavery, it was about states' rights. I have one simple question for you. States' rights to what exactly? Their right to what? There's only one answer to that. There's only one answer to that. And you know what? I'm sorry, but this was a dark, dark chapter in American history. If your ancestors fought for the Confederacy, I'm not saying you have to hang your head in shame, but you know what? Wearing going around with a license plate or a T-shirt or whatever the hell else you are, acting like you should be proud of it, that really doesn't put you many steps above the cross burners. I'm sorry. And in a lot of cases, we're dealing with the exact same people. We got to put an end to this shit, especially when it comes to working people fighting against other working people over color or different religions or whatever the fuck it may be. At the end of the day, it's not, that's what they want. They want working people fighting with each other over anything that they can possibly fight with each other over, so that at the end of so they're able to basically screw us in the ass the whole time. Don't cave into that. Don't follow what they're trying to make you do. End the fucking hate. And if you want to end the hate, that starts with not putting fucking Confederate flags on license plates, in my opinion.
Obviously there's we could go down a whole slew of roads, and let's asterisk that, because I think it can be an entire podcast, right? The whole right to free speech versus what you're actually fucking saying, right? And the level or wherever, just like you said, that we got to get to in terms of society. Great story. As always, Adamizer. I tell you what, let's not keep the 805 waiting any longer. We'll take a quick call break here, and no, we won't. Did the 805 just cut out on us? I think he did. Well, or she did. All right, 805. Well, we were just about to go to you. Didn't want to keep you waiting any longer, but
I
please
think that
call
may
back.
That may be our friend from last week who ended up in the call queue and didn't necessarily want to. I'm not sure, but maybe that's what happened.
Oh, right. Sure. Well, either way, he or she can call back at 646-668-8756. Love to hear from you here in the front row. Please call in. I will just move right along with... and I'm sorry, but another headline with a religious slant, Jesus Christ, sorry about that, freaks. I didn't even realize I was doing it. But anyway, this one is from, look at me going mainstream media here, Adamizer, CBSLocal.com.
Wow,
and,
man.
Yeah, man.
Are we going to pull something out of Fox News next? Holy shit.
religious and mainstream, and I tell you, we're going to get on a radio station yet, Adamizer. No, but CBSLocal.com, and they actually put a spotlight on the tender, forgiving, altruistic hand of the church in the story entitled San Francisco's St. Mary's Cathedral drenches homeless with water to keep them away. Apparently, the church has 4 covered alcoves that attracted those sinful wretches, the homeless, just as some shelter at night. And the answer, of course, well, let's put in a system that drenches the area with water from 30 feet above every half hour. Jesus would indeed be proud. For blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Now dry your ass off and get in here, will ya? Back to you, Adamizer.
I just want to point out, a friend of mine mentioned to me something the other day that I did not know about, and I haven't double-checked it to make sure he had it entirely accurate, but apparently right here in New Hampshire, in the capital in Concord, they have a law against giving things to homeless people from your car, something to do with, traffic hazards or whatnot, whatever other excuse they used. But it's absolutely amazing to me the way that we treat the less fortunate in this country. And, that we'll get more into it in the economic segment, when we get into haranguing and whatnot. But holy shit, man, let's have a fucking heart,
Absolutely.
Right.
It's funny because, as I said, just before you get into your next story, as I said, I was listening to a lot of zeitgeist stuff, and I remember a line specifically from one of the lectures, and he said, "Have you noticed that there's no war on homeless? Right? There's war on drugs, war on this, war on that, war on this, but no war on the homeless. Why? There's no fucking money in it." Right? And you can bet your ass if there was money on it and a way to take advantage of it, there would be a war on homelessness. So, anyway, to you, Adamizer.
All right. So the next story I got here comes to us from truthout.org. That's truth-out.org. I really enjoy this site. I mentioned in the past being a big fan of Professor Richard Wolff. He's a contributor at this site, and I recommend it to everybody. The headline here is On the News with Thom Hartmann, Thom Hartmann, two N's in Hartmann. Republicans unveil their latest austerity budget and more. And what really caught my eye here was the idea of calling it an austerity budget, which I think is a beautiful way to describe what we're dealing with here, and a real good segue for me to just mention austerity and what we're talking about for those of you who may not understand the term. It's a big term in Europe right now, especially in Greece and other places, and it's very simple. What austerity means is, hey, we don't have the money to pay for public services anymore, to pay to protect the economically less fortunate, so we're not going to do that. And of course, the decision is, in all cases in our modern society is, do you tax the rich or do you take services away from the poor and the people who need it? When you're talking about austerity, that's when you make the decision to take the services away from the poor and not tax the rich. So we're looking at this Republican budget, and not surprisingly, that's exactly what they want to do. They want to lower taxes on the rich, particularly things like estate taxes, what's the other one? Capital gains taxes, etc. Things that only affect the rich. Okay, I mean, Crafty, you and I aren't exactly going to be too worried in our lifetime about estate taxes and capital gains taxes, and if we are, I think we're on the wrong side. But the fact is, they want to cut taxes for the rich, and again, you can't cut taxes on the rich without cutting services to the not-so-rich. In fact, it's happening in New Hampshire right here. They just announced the other day they're going to be cutting about half the Department of Transportation's budget. They're going to be slicing through the meals. I think it's the Meals on Wheels or some similar program. But the general idea is that the politicians are too afraid to go out and tax the people who are paying for their campaigns, who are paying lobbyists to keep the politicians living fat and happy. So they're not going to do that. They're going to screw everybody else. They're going to screw the majority. If that's democracy, then I guess I need a new fucking dictionary, because this is absolute craziness. Now, just the one last little thing I wanted to say on this particular article, they also talked about an alternative being proposed by and I say the more leftist folks, and I really choose those words carefully because I don't think we have any American left anymore. There is no leftism around here. Where there's right-wing and there's right-wing light. But those who call themselves the left, whether it's Democrats or whatever else, are putting up a competing people's budget that would repeal sequester cuts, strengthen social safety nets, and invest in working families. Now, it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. But I think, as time passes, we're seeing more and more of the super rich buying up these elections to make damn sure that it's their taxes that get cut and the services of the poor that get cut, rather than swapping that around. So it'd be interesting to see where this goes, especially as we come into an election year, major election year next year. But keep an eye on the budgets, people, because that's where they screw you the most.
Yes, and damn Didi. All fantastic points, and you enjoyed the breakdown of austerity, which I'm sure we'll be getting to more and haranguing around. How many more do you have, Adamizer?
I got two, but I could do more. I could slice it down to one. There's only one that I really, really wanted to get to left, and I think we're getting a little short on time.
Let's do that. Let's do one more each.
Yep.
My last one is also pretty quick, and it's more in line with our current topic of the economy. And I just want to point people's attention to an article on the economiccollapseblog.com and Michael Snyder. Good place to go for some real true kind of stats. But it's 10 charts that show we are in much that we are much worse off than before the last economic crisis. And there's really not much for me to comment on here outside of pointing to the article and have you check it out for yourselves. But here are some of the highlights. The national debt has doubled since the last crash. The velocity of money has been doing nothing but a nosedive ever since 07-08, and as has the labor participation rate. So, basically strap yourselves in, freaks, and please remember, if economic disaster does strike you and you find yourself homeless, try to hold on to that raincoat.
Now,
back to you.
Yeah, let me ask you a question. I'm trying to make sure if I'm matching up the right face to the name. Is Snyder the one that died recently? No, I'm sorry. Different guy I'm thinking of. I just pulled up Michael Snyder's picture. Different guy. Never mind.
Right.
There was a gentleman who had
are you thinking
similar...
of Michael Rupert?
Yes, that's right. Michael, yes, that's what it was. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Yep, he of the peak oil fame.
Yes, exactly, yes.
Yeah, and I always actually enjoyed his earlier work not to get too into it here, but he was an LAPD cop, and he blew the whistle and blew the door wide open on, CIA drug trafficking, at least around the Los Angeles area where he was. And, he did a lot of great work, man. And, taken too soon gone from this world, in my opinion. But let's wrap up with your last piece of scuttlebutt here, Adamizer. We'll
Alrighty.
After that, we'll take a quick break and get to haranguing around.
Sounds good to me. All right, now I saved I don't want to say my favorite for last, but the one that most piqued my interest this week. And it is, unlike yours, not normally I try to keep most of my news stories in line with our topic, but this one just popped up, and I couldn't not bring this on the show. There's headlines all over the place. The one that I'm looking at right now is coming from the Inquisitor at Inquisitor.com, and the headline is Atheist Marriage Ceremony Banned in Oklahoma. Holy shit snacks. I'm not making this up, all right? So in the latest race to screw over the rights of the gays and to make sure they can't get married because, only people should get married and gays aren't people, right? The right wing and the ultra-conservative Christian movements have gone ahead in Oklahoma and made it a requirement that you get a clergyman to sign off on your marriage license. Okay, essentially not just banning gays from getting married, but banning basically anybody who doesn't have a clergyman, anybody who doesn't buy into this whole religious bullshit that we talked about a few shows ago. This is absolute insanity to me. First of all, you have to understand, just for a minute, that marriage is not just about the little piece of paper. Okay, there are certain rights conveyed to a married couple that are not conveyed to people under other circumstances, all right? Now, one of these may be filing your taxes jointly. That's kind of a minor one. But some of them are much more important. The rights you have over the stepchildren, okay? There are step-parent rights. That is a thing. In fact, I'm somewhat familiar with it for reasons I won't get into right now. But step-parent rights, being a step-parent versus being the boyfriend or girlfriend of the parent are two completely different things under the law. Much more commonly cited, of course, is the way you're treated at the hospitals. In a lot of cases, they'll only allow visitation to family members. Well, if you're not married, you're not a family member. Or decision-making, okay, whether, to pull the plug, things like that. These are all rights that go hand in hand with marriage that is being denied now not just to gay people, but to anybody who doesn't bow down before Christ, basically. This idea, this fucking crazy idea that Christians somehow own marriage, that they invented it. They didn't, all right? Marriage existed long before Christ was born. The Jews were doing it long before Christ was born. Even Native Americans and plenty of other people long before the birth of Christ, all right? For Christians to act like they suddenly have the right to decide who gets married, I mean, you get the right to decide who gets married in your church. Sure, absolutely, all right? But there's two parts to marriage. There's the church part that some of us don't give a shit about, and then there's the other part, which, again, is this legal recognition, the fact that certain legal rights are conveyed to you. And if you think that you're doing anything but pissing on the separation of church and state when you enact laws like this, then you're absolutely fucking nutballs, because what the hell, man? What the hell? I don't know how else to describe the arrogance, the ridiculous arrogance and the dehumanization that you're engaging in with this kind of ridiculousness. And I said it somewhere the other day online, but here's the fact. If two gay people getting married is somehow a threat to your fucking marriage, well, guess what? Your marriage isn't exactly on a sturdy foundation to begin with. Maybe its foundation is the Bible. Maybe you need to look a little more closely at that fucking bullshit. But, this is absolutely ridiculous. As a married atheist man, I am so fucking happy I don't live in Oklahoma. And I think the only thing more ridiculous than this is I can't believe it was Oklahoma first and not Texas.
Right. Yeah, that reminds me, I was looking at some land in Oklahoma. I guess that's going to have to be put on hold. Kidding, of course. But, no, it's insane, Adamizer. I mean, I liken, as I've said before, us to bizarro world, and that's all it is, man. It's we are in complete bizarro world, and it, I think the side shoot to that story is you don't have anything better to do than passing these bills, like. Has everything else been accomplished, right? Like,
yeah, I mean,
so this makes it to the docket.
And go around hating on people that aren't you.
This makes its way through the process. Like, Jesus Christ, it's funny because I think you brought up New Hampshire, and I just saw a story about some fourth grade, in New Hampshire, fourth graders tried to get some bird, the state bird, and people were pissed because the legislation squashed it, right? And they're like, we don't got time to be naming state birds, right? So, and he kind of, he sounded like a pompous prick, which I'm sure he was, but that kind of goes to the point here. It's like, you got nothing better to do than to be thinking of this. Like, get the fuck out of here. But all right, folks, that's your scuttlebutt for the evening. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.